Uhuru. I want to thank you, KC, for that introduction and Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Under the leadership of the African Solidarity Committee that made this event possible. And I want to thank all of you who have come out to participate in this, our first Day of Reparations to African people. Historically, this has been characterized as Day of Solidarity with African people. And for the longest period of time, the greatest difficulty has been to win white people to come out to express the solidarity with African people. Today's event is happening right in North St. Louis, in the heart of the African community, but in most instances that has not been the case. It's been held in white communities. And the struggle has been to get white people to express a need to be in solidarity with African people. And I am happy to see you who have come out on today. I know that in some ways this is difficult for you, for white people. We are in St. Louis, where we have seen the reemergence of the African liberation movement in this country, stemming from the August 2014 murder of Mike Brown by Darren Wilson, a white man in a police uniform. And since that time, St. Louis has become sort of the protest capital of the United States. And if we were to measure progress by the number of protests and the existence of professional protesters that you can find here in St. Louis, there shouldn't be a human being in shackles any place on the planet Earth. But the reality is that nothing has changed, except many people who call themselves protesters have found careers being protesters. This also is a difficult and different kind of meeting, because I do not cut a sympathetic figure and do not intend to cut a sympathetic figure. It's not sympathy that we are looking for. The fact of the matter is, when we talk about being in solidarity with the African Revolution, we're talking about something that benefits white people perhaps even more than it does Africans and other colonized people. Right. And I say this because for several hundred years now, white people have existed in voluntary exile from the human family. And many of you have not wanted that to be the case, wanted things to be different, but haven't quite known how to go about it. And then there's Barack Hussein Obama, who runs for office, and someone feels like this is the way I can express my unity and solidarity. I'll vote for Obama, or I'll come out and protest every opportunity I get in St. Louis or some other place like that. But we live in a foul social system. It is a social system that has its origin, its beginning, in slavery and colonialism. This is the origin of this social system. This is a social system that is known as capitalism. And many people do recognize certain features of capitalism and often think, because they recognize these features and because they are often engaged in certain activities that respond to these symptoms, these features, that they are moving in a way to overturn this. Many people actually believe that the core of contradictions that the human family finds itself confronted with today are certainly the laboring masses, certainly those people who have to sell the value of their labor power, who have to give up their land and resources. People like that believe that another social system is absolutely necessary. And sometimes they do understand some things about capitalism. For example, many people understand that capitalism is based on commodity production. In other words, in the capitalist system, everything that is produced for sale. Profit is the motive force for everything that is produced. Commodity. It's not that things are produced, it's that things are produced for sale, for trade. Commodity. So people recognize this. And that means that when you look at medicine is not created to heal anybody, it's created to make a profit. Hospital is not created for sick people, it's created for profit. Everything is based on profit with commodity production. And some people know that and they hate it. They listen to someone like this, the latest criminal, I say criminal, but that's not absolutely accurate, because crime is something that's defined by the ruling class, and every criminal in power legalizes himself. That's why slavery was legal, you see. You can't say somebody who held slaves was a criminal, not certainly in terms of US and European law. They broke the laws that existed in the places that they came to and kidnapped people. But this character in the White House today, people say they like to talk about this whole question of the assault on freedom of the press and other diplomatic norms, where this man Khashoggi, who was an employee of the Washington Post, went into the Saudi embassy in Turkey, and now we know that he was kidnapped in the embassy, beaten, tortured, and cut into little pieces and disappeared. And Trump says, it's all right, because we're making a lot of money with Saudi Arabia, so we can't do anything about that. Well, Trump is not unusual in terms of being motivated by profit. Except the thing that's different with Trump says it. Right. Trump says it and he does it, and the others say something else and do it. Do the same thing that Trump has done. I mean, horrible offenses been made against humanity and continues to be made against humanity every day by people who exercise power in this country and throughout Europe. And as they do this, they have the ability and power to cast aspersion on other peoples and groups whom they engaged in terrorizing and criminalizing and brutalizing on a daily basis. Iran being one such example. You're familiar with Iran. You know that in 54, 55, the United States government overthrew the elected government in Iran, overthrew this government, Mohammad Mossadegh, and put a puppet in his place, in his stead. Somebody who would help the United States to protect their interests in the Persian Gulf. And they did horrible things to the Iranian people. If there is attitude about America in Iran, the United States earned it. They got it the American way. Yeah. So Trump is not unusual, except that Trump tells the truth sometimes. He's notorious for being a liar, but it's interesting that he tells the truth about the objectives. This is the interest. We got money involved in here, so we are going to overlook the fact that if we can get away with it, the fact that this guy walked into an embassy and left in little pieces, if he left at all. So commodity production is something that's peculiar to capitalism. People have produced forever. That's part of economic activity, economic life. You have to produce. You have to have food, clothing, and shelter. You have to have the ability to produce and reproduce life. That's what the production process is all about. But capitalism means that commodity production, people are not just produce, they produce to sell it. They produce it for the market. And so everything that is produced under capitalism is produced for the market. That's why your post office is disappearing, because some people are upset because they can't make any money. Private businesses can't make any money, so they shut the post office, make the services something that's untenable, etc., because it says too much like socialism. Capitalism is also based on private ownership of the means of production. That's another reason you hate capitalism. Most of us do. Because here you have socialized production. People have to produce collectively. Sometimes people are engaged in the same production process you are involved in factories 3,000 miles away in other countries and what have you. And sometimes in the same factory where there is socialized production on the one hand, but then you have the private ownership of the means of production on the other hand. And that means that, so you have people who make houses and people who build cars and what have you, but can't afford houses and cars. And people who don't do any work at all just because they own the means of production, they got all the cars and all the houses, etc. And so that's another reason. Some people detest capitalism, and I think rightfully so. And then there's this thing that capitalism is based on wage labor, which offers the capitalist an opportunity to steal the value of your labor. Somebody goes to work and works for 8 hours and then get paid perhaps for 3 or 4 or 5 hours for what they do, because they don't get paid for what they produce. They get paid for their ability to produce, which means that you go in and you might make tables, but you don't get paid the value of the table. You get paid enough to make it possible for you to come back the next day and make tables. This is how the capitalist system works, and that makes you hate capitalism too, and that's all right. You should be indignant about that. But the missing ingredient that most people are not associated with when they talk about hatred of capitalism, sometimes some of our friends hate capitalism, and they will run this down to you about commodity production and private ownership and wage labor, and the fact that people are exploited at the point of production. You get a worker who used to be in Detroit and go to Detroit, and they get ripped off in Detroit at the point of production because they don't get paid the full value of what it is that they have done. They don't get the car. They produce the car. They get enough, hopefully, to be able to repair themselves so they can come back the next day and work again, and so that they can be able to have children that reproduce them to be able to come into the factories so that the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, will always have workers. That's how the system works. But the fundamental thing that's missing for most of them, and this is what we talk about parasitic capitalism, is because everything that we just mentioned that characterized capitalism, capitalist production, everything, commodity production, private ownership, wage labor, all of that rests upon the foundation of slavery and colonialism. Yes. Without slavery and colonialism would be a Detroit. Right. At the point of production, hell, when you look at where most of the resources that come from, that goes into the car, the bauxite that makes aluminum, that comes from places like Guyana in South America or in Guinea in Africa. When you look at where the resources come to get there in the first place, when you get to where the workers came to build Detroit, when you get all of that, then when you get where this land that people, this land is my land, isn't there a song, something like that? When you look at where this comes from, then you see that there's parasitism as the profound aspect of what capitalism is. It's a parasite, it's born parasitic. Yep. So even some of our most ardent communists, in quotes, are incapable of coming to that conclusion, because to do so requires a profound self-criticism of the very society that they inhabit. It is a society based on slavery and colonialism. No slavery, no colonialism, no America. No Negroes to pick the cotton and bring the mint juleps to Missy on the front porches, etc. The whole thing is based on stolen land and stolen human beings and stolen resources. The entire edifice rests upon that. Therefore, we want to say, how the hell do we fix it? How do we grow another kind of system? Why is it that here we are, living here in St. Louis, and I love the African community of St. Louis, by the way, but I don't love St. Louis. And when you walk around and see the rich history, the rich culture, the rich history of resistance that's in this city, then you see this huge disparity in terms of the lives of people here. When you come to North St. Louis in particular, and it looks like a place that might have been bombed in Syria or some other place. When the African community is contained and denied a capacity to produce life. There are no jobs. There is no economic development. There is no economy, so to speak of. There is no social wealth at all here. And without that, of course, there must necessarily be police containment of this community, because otherwise we're coming to get it where it is.
Right.
And where it is in the white communities. The vast amount of wealth and resources on the planet Earth is located in some white community, someplace. Yeah. And it didn't get there. By the genius of white people. And I know that is something that makes white people feel so good. But it's not how it happened. Yeah. It's not how this land got to be possessed by white people. It's not how I happen to be here. I am here now as opposed to the continent of Africa, because Africa was attacked 600 years ago, first by Portugal, and then there's been ongoing assault on the continent of Africa. More than 100 million Africans lost lives just in the process of coming here. Just the whole degradation of human life, of labor. Labor is something that is hated and today. People don't even want to characterize themselves as the working class or the workers, because of how associated the question of labor is with slavery of African people. This is the reality that we are confronted with. And now we're asking you to be able to recognize and understand as well. In the 1920s, an amazing movement happened in this country. A lot of incredible stuff was happening in the 20s, as you know. It was the emergence and development of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia that happened in 1917. We saw the emergence of the Versailles Treaty and the League of Nations, and just a lot of activity happening around the world, because as you know, the first imperialist war, they call World War I, was a war to redivide the world among imperial powers. And then this one incredible movement happened. It was led by a man whose name is Marcus Garvey, who most people you don't know, because he's been almost completely erased from history. And he built an organization called the Universal Negro Improvement Associations and African Communities League. And at its height, it had up to 11 million African people across the globe were a part of this movement. They existed here in the United States. They existed all over the Caribbean, South America, India, Australia, whatever, where black people were. And they answered to the slogan, Africa for Africans, at home and abroad. And this became a question in part because at the at the League of Nations, they were debating who was going to get what parts of Africa that was being shared out because from the losers of the First Imperialist War. The people who lost the war lost their African territories, etc. Germany lost territory. That's how there came to be the Belgian Congo, or the Belgians, because of Germany once having its influence in places like Rwanda, etc. And as they were having this debate, who was going to get Southwest Africa and all of this, and it was the Garvey movement, the Garvey who had organized us all around the world, who said Africa for Africans at home and abroad. It was Garvey who went into Liberia and organized a base there for Africans to take equipment and to establish villages and economic development there in Liberia that could spread throughout the continent of Africa. It was Garvey who in 1920 created a steamship line to initiate trade between African people around the world. It was the Universal Negro Improvement Association. That's where the Black Dog comes from. They created factories, recording studios. This is in 1920. This is at a time where Jim Crow ran supreme in the United States. This was at a time where there were only two so-called nominally independent African countries, and that was Liberia and Ethiopia. And Garvey was able to do that. He had a conference, the Negro Convention of the World, was held in 1920 at Madison Square Garden. It was attended by from 25 to 50,000 Africans from around the world. 1920. And we say 25 to 50,000 because it filled Madison Square Garden. Everybody couldn't get there, so they had to set up speakers, and there were thousands of African people who were outside Madison Square Garden who attended that. This is where that red, black, and green flag comes from. They voted in 1920. Africans from around the world said the red, black, and green, that's the flag of Africa and African people around the world. This is the most democratic experience that African people ever had. It happened there. And it was a movement that the United States government and most of the imperialists around the world, they were opposed to this. Garvey is the one who discovered his movement in Liberia, the rubber trees that were there, and the surveys that came back, and they wrote about it in their newspaper that was printed in three different languages. They wrote about it and what we were going to be able to do as a people as a consequence of that. And the United States government, along with some Africans in this country, people who are like the NAACP. In fact, the NAACP was one of those organizations who could not stand the idea that the African working class would come to power, who suffered severe self-alienation as Africans, who flattered by the presence of white people, rather be with white people than anything else in the world. And they betrayed the Garvey movement. And they worked with the United States government and the Communist Party to destroy the movement. They locked up Garvey, put him in prison, and then exiled him from here back to his birthplace, which was Jamaica. But Firestone now owns the land that Garvey had that was going to be able to create the products, the rubber, that was going to help grow the economy of African people. It's owned by Firestone. And then, of course, with the defeat of Garvey, crushing the Garvey movement, it pushed us back. And so the next real, the Garvey movement was the only massive African-led revolutionary organization in this country and much of the world. And after the defeat of the Garvey movement, our struggle was put on the defensive. And so those people and those organizations that worked with the United States to destroy the Garvey movement were the people and organizations that surfaced as the leadership of our communities with the assistance of the United States government and all of its media. Now, instead of saying Africa for Africans, now instead of building our own independent economy to serve our interests as a people, now it's saying that we know that our children will have a future because we've taken that future in our own hands. We were saying we shall overcome. We were talking about integration as if integration is in the power of the oppressed. The oppressed never had the ability to integrate. If integration was going to happen, only white people had the ability to integrate. Except they don't call it integration anymore. It's what it is. It's gentrification.
That's right.
Right? So it's not like the oppressed can integrate.
Right.
It was a filthy trick. It was but you know, a con can only work with somebody who's greedy. And so you have the African petty bourgeoisie, self-alienated, wanting more than anything to be with white people. So it doesn't matter if it's a glaring, obvious kind of lie. You just hold on to it anyway and sell out the future of our people for that. Well, we are materialists in the African People's Socialist Party. And for us, what is real is what can be experienced by the senses. You can touch it, you can smell it, you can see it, you can feel it, you can have that kind of experience. That is, we are materialists. And so we try to look at the world as it is, just as it is, as opposed to how we wish it were. And so that's one of the things that makes us less sympathetic, because we don't try to have a discussion with anybody feeding you nonsense, but trying to be as objectively clear and true, and trying to bring a scientific assessment to the condition that we're all confronted with in this country, and trying to bring you on board with a revolutionary project to overturn this human oppression, recognizing that it is centered in the oppression and colonization of African people and the other colonized peoples around the world. That's what our objective is here today. So that's what Black Power Blueprint is about. That's why we set out to actually begin to construct the ability to liberate ourselves. We say that we disagree with this notion that we're suffering from some kind of contradiction, some racism. What the hell is that? What is it anyway, except something that's in the heads of white people? Right. And so how do I free myself from what's in the heads of white people? How do I liberate myself from what's in the heads of white people? The best thing you do is, you know how the best way you get anybody to love you is to be as much like them as you can. And so the white people got the power. So if you want to liberate yourself, and if this is the way out, then what you do is spend your time trying to be like white people, walk like white people, talk like white people, act like white people, etc. And if you don't, then you're not civilized. Civilization, white people become the template for civilization. Now you figure that shit out. How the hell did that happen? With the murder, brutality, and massacre that the world experiences at the hands of white people become the template for what is civilized. I know how it happens. It's guns. Who controls the guns? Yep. Who controls the power, etc., is the ones who made that kind of determination. So we find a real assault that has been made on the revolutionary capacity of our people to fight for the ability to create and recreate life, our own life, to have our own industry, to control our own economy, to make sure that our children will have a future again, because that future is in our hands. Not because a good white guy got elected or a good Negro got elected, because it's our hand. Because we see the American project is a consequence of slavery and colonialism. It's born of that. The America, as quiet as it's kept, has no redeeming value at all. You can't even pretend that it does. Nope. Here we are on the land of people who don't even get mentioned if they're not in the room, who have been murdered, who are stuck in concentration camps today that people refer to as Indian reservations. And we're in what is called, what was once a part of the Louisiana Purchase in Missouri. And where the hell did the Louisiana, well, Thomas Jefferson was a smart guy, and he was able to get the French, to beat the French. No, I tell you, it was Dessalines. Yes. It was Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines in Haiti who crushed Napoleon's best armies, making the French incapable of defending what they assumed to be their interests here. That made it necessary for the French to unload this territory that Jefferson wanted to use to expand slavery inside this country. This is the reality that we're confronted with. You have to take the scabs off this nastiness and be able to look at it just as it really is, so that we can change it and enter into a new relationship. African people don't need charity. We need revolution. We need total liberation. And the question is whether or not at this point in time there are enough white people, Europeans, who can unite with the struggle that we are making to take our freedom for ourselves. That's the question and this is the place where white people can rediscover something that approximates humanity. Yes. And also can destroy this enemy of all of the toiling masses of the world. Because when you look at the oppression of women, white power does that. Yes. When you look at the oppression of homosexuals, white power does that. Yes. When you look at the exploitation of the workers of the world, white power does that. And that's exactly why you need to unite with black power to tear it down so that we can create a new world. That's what it's all about. So, I just want to say that we have entered into an entirely new era. And Trump is evidence of that era. And I know there's a tendency to exceptionalize Trump. But he shouldn't be exceptionalized. Every time they say what Trump has done, the most honest of them have to say Obama did it too, but he just did it differently or something to that effect. You can't exceptionalize Trump. This is America.
Yeah.
This is imperialism. And what Trump has done is make it absolutely necessary for people to stare at it just like it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're living in a place today where we are looking at European and capitalist morality. Here, Europe and the capitalists have had the ability to define everybody on the planet Earth. The Iranians are savages, the Iraqis are savages, black people are savages, the indigenous people in the concentration camps are savages. All of us are savages. But I look at European morality made naked to the world, and these crises of imperialism that we're looking at today, and you see an international organization of pedophiles, of criminal pedophiles. I'm talking about the Catholic Church.
Yes.
I'm talking about the Catholic Church that has raped children all over the world, and it's coming out for everybody to see whether they want to see the nastiness or not. This is the Catholic Church. Somebody asked me, do you think that once Bill Cosby got sentenced, that the priests around this country are quivering, thinking that something bad is going to happen to them?
No.
I don't think so. So you look at the Catholic Church, and this is the template and has been the template for morality in European society. You know that.
Yep.
And then we look at Trump exposing to everybody what much of the world already understood about the nature of the U.S. government. That the FBI and the CIA are these thugs and killers. It's really extraordinary to watch many people call themselves leftists and progressives defending the FBI and the CIA. The FBI that assassinated people like Malcolm X and assassinated and set up murderous campaigns to destroy the Black Panther Party of the 1960s, that killed the co-founder of the African People's Socialist Party, that participated in putting me in and out of jail so many times in the 1960s. I had to read a newspaper to discover where I was. The FBI, the CIA, that everybody knows tried to kill Fidel Castro alone so many times. The CIA that's overthrown governments all around the world, overthrew the government of Benz in Guatemala, overthrew the government of Mohammed Mossadegh in Iran. I mean, the CIA that's been committed all these offenses against the world, and you got these leftists, so-called progressives and communists, defending the CIA.
Yes.
Because Trump is exposing them for partially for what it is they are. Of course, Trump is no better than they are. So the morality of the U.S. has been made naked. The morality of Europe has been made naked with this nastiness of the Pope and the Catholic Church. And we think that it's possible for people to engage in building a different world, and that we have to. And we are on the cusp of that world today. And much of the crisis that we see in the social system is a crisis that is based on the fact that one world is dying and another is being born. Yes. That this world of white terror, exploitation, that peoples are fighting back. It's no longer possible for France to simply go to Africa, the 14 different so-called territories that France controls, and just kill Africans there. It's no longer for France to kill Arabs and Muslims with impunity in North Africa. People are bringing it to France. Yes. Towers are being destroyed in New York, the most secure country in the world. Germany, every place you look, the people who have been terrorized and violated for centuries are now bringing the war to the safe enclaves of Europe. It is something that is shattering this assumption about the ability of Europe to do what it wants to do with impunity. It is something that is forcing, finally, white people to have to ask questions. Never had to ask questions before. As long as America and Europe could go any place they wanted to do and kill, murder people with impunity, as long as our children would die with impunity, never had to ask a question. But it's only when now death is visiting the most civilized countries in Europe, the citadel of white power, that white people have to ask questions. They might initially go crazy like after 9/11 said kill everybody, and you heard that. But eventually it becomes clear they can't kill everybody. And so people have to ask questions, if only for their own security. But what we are saying with this meeting is that this is a part of a process to allow Europeans, North Americans, to step forward and to join with the rest of us. Because we are in a life and death battle, struggle. And to the extent that white people can unite with that, white people discover your own humanity. Because this attempt to believe that we are not human, and this is what much of it is all about. You can't get away with this if you accept the humanity of the victims, of the Africans, the Mexicans, and the Indians, etc. To the attempts that whites are forced to say that they are also human. And it's that, at that point where whites are discovering your own humanity. Yes. And so this is a splendid opportunity. And I really appreciate this time to talk with you. Again, a whole world is being built. We are a different kind of organization. We're not a charity organization. We're not a protest organization. We are fighting for the total liberation of Africa and African people around the world. I say Africa because it's impossible for us, my people, to have got ownership in Africa as an African in 1619 and get off in Jamestown, Virginia as a Negro. If we were Africans when we got on the damn ship, we were Africans when we got off the ship. And in fact, that's the only way we can begin to explain some of what is happening to us as a people, is the fact that we are a colonized nation that has been dispersed around the world. So we recognize that. We are a revolutionary organization. The last memory most of us have of revolutionary organization, the best memories that most of us have, even if we weren't alive, when we reflect, we go back and watch newsreels and read about it, was the era of Che Guevara, was the era of Patrice Lumumba, was the era of Kwame Nkrumah, was the era of the Black Panther Party, was the era of genuine revolutionary movements that were not based on charity and begging, but on creating a new world and opening up the door for anybody who wanted to join, to participate in creating that world, to do so. In fact, it was Che Guevara who said, it's not a matter of well-wishing, but sharing the same fate in victory or in death. Uhuru.